I was born into a world of nothing but hate and misery. At the age of 8, I was taken out the home for child endangerment and abuse. I was thrown into the system where I went from foster home, then the group home. And then when I turned 12 years old, I found myself in a mental institution. And from there, it was one institution to another mental institution. I was just all over the place. And it wasn't until I was 15 when I got locked up for the first time. From there, I went from juvenile detention centers to youth detention centers to juvenile penitentiaries. So my whole 10 years of from the age of 8 to the age of 18, I was in and out of institutions, never saw freedom. At the age of 18, I was finally set free for the first time in my life. Now, when I was released into the world, I didn't have a job. I had no education, I had no money, no clothes, I had nothing, absolutely nothing. But the judge had said, look, if you mess up, you're an adult now. You're just going to have to face the big boy consequences. Okay. Threw me out and I was free. I didn't know how to behave, didn't know how to act. Them same issues I was dealing with as a child had followed me to the age of 18. Needless to say, my heart followed its wicked nature and got back into gang activities, tried selling drugs, and eventually went on a robbing spree. About 5.5 months later, at the age of 18, I will find myself sitting in jail, facing a lot of time for a string of armed robberies. It was at that time that I figured life wasn't even worth living. I knew I was going to spend at least the next 25 years in prison. So with the mentality you had, I went into the prison system thinking I'm never going to make it. So why care? So I just went in. Every opportunity I had, nothing but anger, hatred filled me. And everybody around me had that same mentality. So when you have an environment where you have anger, frustration, and no one knows how to deal with it because they're emotionally immature, there's a lot of clashing of heads. And it was a place where I fit in. So I felt at home. At the age of 19, I was sent from a medium security penitentiary to a maximum security penitentiary. I was in the old Fort Madison. For those of you who don't know, Fort Madison is a maximum security penitentiary, 22-hour-a-day lockdown. And Iowa doesn't have the death penalty. So all the serial killers, rapists, the apex predators, they could be found at this one place. And there I was as a teenager. And I fit right in. Even though I wasn't that extreme, the anger and hatred that I had harbored from a young age helped me fit in. So it was 2005. I found myself in cell block 219, 220. That is long-term solitary confinement. The reason is because a guard has said I threatened them. Now, in prison, those type of environments, you threaten one guard, you might as well threaten them all. And they made me pay. And I remember sitting in that cell, they had stopped basically feeding me. When they opened the food slot, they look at me and spit on my food and hand me my food. And I knew they was doing things to the juice they was giving me. So I stopped drinking, I stopped eating. They shut off my water, they stripped my cell. I had nothing in there but my boxers and a paper blanket. And I just knew that I wasn't gonna make it, but I was okay with that. A few months go by, and they came around with the book cart, gave me a book, and I don't even remember the name of the book, but it's full of short stories. And I read this book, this passage, and it goes like this: there's a farmer that had came across there's a salesman that had came across a farmer, and this farmer had a chicken coop, and inside this chicken coop was a bunch of chickens, but in the middle was a lone eagle, and this eagle was pecking at the ground, scratching, had all the characteristics of a chicken. And the salesman was like, what's the deal with this chicken? Farmer said, I don't know. I found the egg, didn't know what it was, gave it to the chickens to hatch. Out came an eagle. And I was like, what are you going to do with it? Let me get it. And the farmer's like, why? It's worthless. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't produce eggs. You can't eat it. All it does is eat up all my chicken feed. So why do you want it? Long story short, the man convinced him to give him this eagle. The man salesman took the eagle to the top of a cliff and he held it above his head and he said to this eagle, look, I'm gonna throw you down because I'd rather have you die right here, right now, than have you living your life as something that you're not. So he threw it, and its eagle was falling and falling, mere inches from the ground. For the first time in his life, this eagle spread its powerful wings and it flapped for the first time, and it took flight, and it was flying high. Now, the reason why this story had touched me so deeply is because as children, as eggs, we can't control our environments. We can't control what goes on around us. But there comes a time in each and everybody's life when we become consciously aware of who we are, what we are, our strengths, our weaknesses. I knew at that moment that I was that ego. Even though I had been surrounded by all this negativity, all this evilness, all this wickedness, I knew that wasn't me. I knew I belonged in the heavens. I knew I belonged with the Eagles. So from that day forward, I had completely changed my life. It took me a few years to convince the people that I had made enemies with on the yard that I was no longer that person. I was no longer full of hatred. I was no longer full of wanting to do wrong. I knew that I belonged in this heavens, not pecking on grounds. I didn't belong in that environment. And it was a long, strenuous journey, but one day, 1 foot, one step, I continued to walk till I was able to run. And now all I want to do is fly like that eagle. Thank you.